Now, in these evening meetings, we've been dealing with the theme of the end time or the last days. And we're going to continue with that. Last night, I took the words of the greatest of all the Hebrew prophets. The Hebrew people have produced a wonderful line of prophets, but there's one who towers above them all, and his name is Jesus. And we examined what I believe to be the greatest of all his prophetic discourses, which he gave from the Mount of Olives just before he suffered. It's recorded in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. Tonight I want to move on from there, and I want, by the help of the Lord, to give you a kind of general picture of what the condition of the world will be like in the last time. And this, I believe, is something that concerns all of us. We need to understand the kind of situation in which we are living, because it is not an easy situation, and it is not going to get any easier. In fact, it's going to get a lot tougher. So we need to be prepared. The first thing that we need to bear in mind is that there's more than one side to the situation in the world in these last days. There's a bright side and a dark side. There is wonderful good and terrible evil, and they are coexisting side by side in the world today. And we have to consider both, because otherwise we'll give people a very one-sided impression of the condition of the world and the situation that confronts us. We can speak only about the good and give people an unrealistic sense of optimism which will be shattered when they encounter reality. Or we can speak only about the evil and leave people with a sense of hopelessness. I remember years ago I was teaching on the need to pray for our government, and a dear lady came up to me at the end and said, "But Brother Prince, doesn't the Bible teach that all things are going to get worse and worse?" So I said, no, I believe it teaches some things are going to get worse and worse, and some things are going to get better and better. And I'm one of the things that's going to get better. Amen. So that's the attitude that I want to impart to you. We look at just a few scriptures that bring out this contrast between good and evil. We'll start with Isaiah chapter 60, verses 1, 2, and 3, which is addressed primarily to Zion. And its ultimate message is to the Jewish people, but it has a message for all believers. Isaiah chapter 60, verses 1 through 3. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and deep darkness the peoples. But the Lord will arise over you, and his glory will be seen upon you. The Gentiles or the nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. There is a very clear contrast. On the one hand, the glory of the Lord over his people, drawing even the rulers of nations, and on the other hand, deep darkness covering the peoples of the earth. And those of us who travel and see the situation in the world today, I think we would all agree that the darkness is growing deeper. It is gross darkness. But in the midst of it, side by side with the darkness, is the brilliant light of God's glory upon his people. So we do not have to be discouraged by the darkness, but we do not have to be unrealistic about it. We are faced by a challenge of evil, such as has never faced humanity since the days of Noah. And then in Matthew 13, I will not read there, but verses 24 through 30 and 37, Jesus teaches the parable of the wheat and the tares. And tares, I understand, are sort of plants that look like wheat, but they don't produce fruit. They're kind of weeds. And in this parable, a certain man sowed good seed in his field, but an enemy came in the night and sowed tares. And so in due course, when the wheat grew up, the tares grew up in the midst of it. And the servants of the man who owned the field said, "What shall we do? Shall we go and root up all the tares?" And he said, "No, because if you do that, you may root up some of the wheat as well. Let them both grow together until harvest. Then I will send out my servants, and they will root up the tares." Now that's a picture of what we call Christendom. It's not the whole world, but it's the world that professes Christianity. The wheat are the true believers. The tares are the counterfeit believers. They look like them, but they don't bear fruit. And remember what Jesus said, "By their fruit you will know them." Not by their profession, not by their gifts, not by their words, but by their fruit. And I believe that's the situation in Christendom today. The wheat and the tares are growing up side by side. And God, in his wisdom, is not going to root out the tares until the harvest is complete. So there we are, we have them. And you have to decide whether you're wheat or whether you're tares. And the decision must be based on the kind of fruit you produce in your life. And then Jesus says the harvest is the end of the age. At the end of the age, God will deal with that situation. As a pastor, and I think many pastors have felt the same, there were times when I thought, let's go out and root up the tares. I'm so tired of these people that make all the profession and produce no fruit. But I realized God in his wisdom didn't give me that job. In fact, he's reserved it for angels. One of the interesting things about agriculture, or whatever you want to call it, agronomy, is that the same climatic conditions that ripen the wheat ripen the tares. And I believe we are approaching a time of tremendous ripeness, both in the wheat and in the tares. And if you were to ask me what kind of condition in the world is causing both the wheat and the tares to ripen together, my answer would be permissiveness. I believe we live in a generation which is incredibly permissive. People tolerate almost anything. But it's true in the church, too. 50 years ago, you wouldn't meet many people that would lift their hands in the air and clap them and dance in the aisles. Basically, Christianity was regarded as a pretty gloomy business. You had to sit a certain way, use a certain kind of language, and don't get excited, and be very sober. But all that has changed. Some of you never lived in those days. You can't imagine what it was like. But today, anything goes. You can have any kind of performance. You can have people turning cartwheels on the platform. And somebody will say, "Isn't that wonderful?" So just bear in mind that the same climate that is letting wickedness grow is allowing the Christians to become free. And I think, in a sense, because of the permissiveness, we're each of us left to decide, what will I indulge in? How will I take advantage of the permissiveness that's in the world today?